Yo, what's going on everybody? So Boruto episode 126 is done and in the books, and upon first viewing it'd be very tempted to summarize this episode as Shukaku, the One-Tails, ends up going on a field trip to a junkyard and discovers that he actually likes human beings and he's very fond of little girls who have veins popping outside of their eyes, and they particularly have the power to knock out a nine-tailed fox. It'd be very tempted to say that, and upon first viewing of the episode, that's kind of where I was leaning on it. This was at first gonna start out being a bit more of a sarcastic review, and then as I got to thinking about the episode, literally right when I'm getting ready to cut my microphone on and start talking to you how I am now, all of a sudden a bunch of stuff just popped in my head. And I gotta be real with you, right? I gotta be real with you. I really started to bash this episode because I'm like, okay, we get it, Naruto is asleep because he's so exhausted from working so much. At the same time, I'm like, man, there's nothing exciting about seeing the Uzumaki family walking around the Konoha village and Hinata making Naruto try on a pink shirt even though that happened off screen, and just all the little small stuff like getting the revelation that there's a Senju park and there's nothing for the Uchiha clan. That Uchiha clan discrimination is real, man. We need a statue of Itachi somewhere. We got a Senju clan park and we don't have nothing for Itachi. That is so discriminatory right there. Yo, but for real though, so getting serious on this though, right? Getting serious. So I gotta say, there were a few moments in this episode where I'm glad that the writers finally decided to tackle something that I've been screaming at the top of my lungs for the 2.5 years I've been doing Naruto videos on a serious basis. So going all the way back to my time at Kryptonian Saiyan, I kept telling people, like, you guys keep asking where the Biju, like, I know you don't see them, but you have to go back to the end of the Naruto manga. The Sage of Six Paths told all the Biju, I want you to keep part of your chakra inside of Naruto. I want you guys to use him as a meeting point. Anytime you guys need to have discussions or talk, or if anything happens, Naruto will be the conduit for you. And so when that happened in the anime in this episode, I was really glad to see that. And I would have really liked to have seen a flashback, since they incorporated all these flashbacks from the Boruto anime. I would have liked a flashback from Naruto Shippuden where the Sage of Six Paths is making that request, because I really feel like this would have helped a lot of newer fans in order to understand, like, okay, Naruto legit has chakra from all of the Biju. Like, so I like seeing that part. I really like the fact that the other thing that we're seeing is that the other Biju are in their natural habitat in the surrounding areas around their villages. So I did like that. I did like seeing that. I thought that that was pretty cool. Now the other thing though, the other thing is when you have that moment where Naruto's having the conference call, that was a small nod to actually something that happens in the Shikamaru Shinden novel, and that's actually what I wanted to get into in this review. This episode is actually in a roundabout way. It's really roundabout. I was gonna say subtle, but it's actually a roundabout way. They're actually setting up the Shikamaru Shinden novel. Now, when that happens, I have no idea when they're gonna do the anime adaptation, because in order to do that novel, you're gonna have to do the Sasuke Shinden novel, you're gonna have to do the Majina Bandits arc, and then you're gonna have to have the Shikamaru novel after that, because of where those two novels take place. It's before, during, and after the events of the Majina Bandits arc. So I mean, it's gonna be very interesting to see how they kind of pull that off because of the timeline placement. But see, here's what's interesting though, right? In that Shikamaru novel, there are a few moments in the novel where you get confirmation that Naruto still has the chakra of each of the Biju inside of him, and it's a really funny scene where Sakura's looking for a book that belongs to Tsunade, and there's some free indirect discourse where you have the revelation that, like, Naruto's hearing voices inside his head, and it's because all the Biju are talking inside of him and the chakra's messing up for a little bit, and so Naruto basically spaces out. And it's in that we get the revelation that Naruto has a small part, not the whole thing, but a small part of the power that the Sage of Six Paths gave him. So it'd be very cool to actually see that part animated. Now, the other thing that was being set up in this episode that relates to the Shikamaru novel is the fact that you have Shikamaru talking about a 5 Kage summit. Now, here's the thing. They've gone out of their way 2 times in the last 2 weeks to have Sasuke nearby and have Shikamaru bring up the 5 Kage summit. Now, the reason why that is big is in that Shikamaru novel, novel. In that Shikamaru novel, you have a 5 Kage summit, and things get really heated when it comes to Shikamaru and the different Kage. Like, he basically says, I want all the smoke, right? He says, I want all the smoke, and he basically plans to snuff out 2 of the Kage. I'm not gonna say which ones. Here's what's cool about that though, right? Like, that novel is basically setting up the fact that the 5 Kage, even though they're at peace, and the anime's kind of hint at this, even though they're at peace, there's still underlying tensions between each of them. So I like that the anime is starting to set those things up. Now let's go ahead and move into like the meat and potatoes of this, right? Like the big homie Nux would say, the meat and potatoes of it. This episode, for the most part, I mean, it's slice of life. Nothing major really happens outside of the fact, like I was saying, Shukaku basically goes on his field trip to the junkyard, and I'm being sarcastic obviously, but essentially Himawari is supposed to be keeping watch over Shukaku. Actually, the whole Uzumaki household is supposed to be watching Shukaku, but Naruto's so exhausted from working all the time that he falls asleep at the park. Hinata decides to stay with Naruto. They're inside the village, so I mean, the threat of somebody taking Shukaku inside the village is gonna be really, really small. So I mean, I get why Hinata wasn't really tripping off of that, but you know, Himawari gets tricked by the One Tails, and Shukaku tells her like, hey, I'm gonna give you a super secret mission. I need you to get away from your brother. And you know, you see the whole thing with the One Tails basically being up to his antics and playing tricks. And what's so interesting about it is Himawari's like, I don't remember what happened when my father became Hokage, and that's because when that happened, when you look at the timeline, that moment where Naruto becomes Hokage takes place, I believe, a year or so after the epilogue of Naruto the Last. So in the epilogue of Naruto the Last, Boruto's 5 years old and Himawari is 3 years old in that epilogue. And so what's really cool is the fact that she's like, no, I don't remember. And that's very consistent with the fact that at that age, you know, children are starting to actually form memories and actually retain them. So I thought that was pretty cool in the fact that, you know, her memory wasn't actually there. But what you end up seeing in this episode is after Shukaku goes to sleep and his teapot kettle is taken away and it's taken to the junkyard, basically, Boruto's freaking out and he's thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to actually destroy this crane before it can lift up all the trash and have everything smashed. We can't let anything happen to the One Tails. And I was waiting for Boruto to actually do what he was talking about, but what ends up happening is Himawari, through all of her distress and her heightened sense of emotion, actually ends up awakening the Byakugan. And what's so interesting about her awakening the Byakugan is, once again, I mean, we see that, you know, this little girl, you know, when she does get the opportunity to get trained, if that does happen, if that happens, Himawari could be very powerful. I thought that was pretty cool, just actually seeing the world through the perspective of her with her Byakugan, where you literally see everything as she's looking for the teapot in real time. I thought that was cool. But the other thing is like, I do think it's possible that because Himawari's Byakugan has been awakened, that you could have a scenario where all of a sudden they're taken back to Hiyashi, because he specifically said in episode 7 or episode 8 that if Himawari's Byakugan ever awaken again, that he wants to be made note of it, he wants to be made aware of it, that way they can take precautions with her. So I think that you are going to start seeing something with Himawari and her grandfather. But you know, outside of that, the only other redeeming thing outside of setting up the Shikamaru Shinden novels is the fact that I did like that moment where when Naruto is tucking in Himawari and the nine-tailed fox Kurama basically tells him like, hey, you've really started to settle into this parent thing. And Naruto starts laughing. He's like, yeah, well, you know, you're kind of like a guardian too, aren't you? And I like how they tie that together at the end of the episode. And you have Shukaku basically admitting like, okay, you know, I've started to grow a little attached to his family. And Kurama realizes what he's trying to say without actually saying it, because the One Tails basically starts, you know, kind of talking out the side of his mouth, and Kurama calls him on his bullshit. And what he says is the fact that, you know, when you're with this family, it drive you crazy, but there's never a boring moment with them. But what I did like about that is the fact that Kurama is telling the One Tails like, yeah, you know, they're not too bad when you get to know them a little bit. And the One Tails fires back at Kurama and tells him like, yeah, you know, I can see it, you know, you're basically the guardian for this family, you know, you've gotten really attached. And you know, Kurama, being the little asshole that he is, basically says like, okay, that's enough of you, like I don't want to hear none of this anymore. So I like that you got to see their personalities. And you know, again, I like the moment where all the Biju for the most part are meeting with Naruto. A few of them are still out doing their own thing, and I like how the Biju say we're all indebted to you, so whatever you say is essentially going to go, but you still see the very strong personalities. And you know, again, I would say my biggest knock is when Boruto was talking about how the real source of Naruto's power is the nine-tailed fox. I would have liked a couple of things. First of all, I would have liked if the anime would have clarified the fact that yes, while the nine tails does make up a large part of Naruto's chakra, the fact that Naruto's chakra reserves were high enough, even without the nine-tailed fox, according to Kakashi in the manga, even without the nine-tailed fox, Naruto's chakra reserves were 2 to 4 times bigger than Kakashi's in Shippuden. So I thought that would have been cool to just have it put in there, like, okay, well, you know, I actually have enough chakra to actually be able to contain the nine tails as well. I would have liked to actually see that bit slipped in there, and then I would have liked to actually seen the Sage of Six Paths have that conversation with Naruto, and Naruto explain to his children that he has bits and pieces of the Biju chakra inside of him, because what they do is they use Boruto's generation as a way to recap a lot of the history of the series, because you have a lot of new fans who are watching the show. But my episode question to you guys is, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Himawari's Byakugan awakening again, and what do you want for her? Do you side with me in the fact that she doesn't need to be a ninja, or do you think that if she doesn't become a ninja, that she needs to take a huge role inside of the Hyuga clan and maybe see that preparation process play out? Let me know what you guys think the future Himawari should be. But as always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Have an awesome day, guys.